When a journalist made fun of Barron Trump at a charity gala, no one anticipated that his composed response would become the highlight of the evening. The ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel was nothing short of breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegantly dressed attendees, their quiet hum of conversation adding to the grandeur of the annual charity gala. Among the crowd were some of the nation's most influential figures, business moguls, actors, and journalists, gathered to support a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth. The air buzzed with energy, yet an undercurrent of anticipation settled over the room as the evening's keynote speaker prepared to take the stage. Seated toward the back, in a less conspicuous corner, was Barron Trump. At just 18, his tall frame and stoic demeanor made him stand out, though not by design. He had been invited by a family friend, a quiet gesture meant to introduce him to a different circle. Unlike many in the room who thrived in the spotlight, Barron seemed content to observe, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room with a calmness beyond his years. The night progressed smoothly. A string quartet played softly in the background as waitstaff moved through the room, offering delicate hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Conversations flowed, laughter rippled through the crowd, but the true highlight of the evening was the keynote speech. The journalist, well known in liberal media circles, had been announced weeks earlier as the event's keynote speaker. Famous for their sharp wit and unapologetic opinions, they were both revered and criticized for their fiery rhetoric. Tonight they promised a speech that would challenge perspectives and ignite thought. As the MC introduced them, a shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Conversations faded, glasses were set down, and all eyes turned to the stage. Barron leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression unreadable. The journalist, dressed impeccably in a sleek black suit, exuded confidence. The audience responded with polite applause, but there was an edge of expectation. Would they push boundaries as they often did? The speech began harmlessly enough. They joked about the city's infamous traffic and shared a light-hearted anecdote about a past gala mishap involving a toppled champagne tower. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking some of the initial tension. For a moment, it felt like any other high-profile event, polished, predictable, and harmless. Then, their tone shifted. What started as general commentary on politics and culture veered into pointed critiques. The journalist took aim at well-known political figures, poking fun at their quirks and missteps. Some in the crowd chuckled, others exchanged glances, their smiles tightening. And then, the focus landed squarely on Donald Trump. Well, we can't talk about the state of the world without mentioning the man who made orange the new black, the journalist quipped, drawing scattered laughter. Love him or hate him, you have to admit, he's the gift that keeps on giving, for people like me. Some laughed openly, others shifted uncomfortably. But Barron, seated quietly at his table, remained still, his expression unreadable. The jokes kept coming, each sharper than the last, mocking Trump's policies, his tweets, his public appearances. The laughter in the room grew thinner, replaced by an uneasy silence. Then the journalist took it a step further. And of course, they said, pausing for effect, we can't forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation. I mean, let's talk about Barron. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Heads turned toward Barron, now the center of attention. The journalist's tone remained playful, but the words carried a sting. Imagine growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by marble everything, while your dad is tweeting about Kofef and the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must have been character building. Nervous chuckles escaped from a few, but most sat in stunned silence. The spotlight had landed squarely on Barron, unasked for, unwanted. Yet, instead of reacting with embarrassment or anger, Barron remained composed. His stillness wasn't indifference, it was something else entirely. The ballroom, once filled with chatter and laughter, fell unnervingly silent. The weight of the moment settled over the crowd. Even the journalist, so confident just moments ago, hesitated, their smirk faltering. Perhaps they had expected a laugh, maybe a dismissive shrug. Anything but this quiet defiance. Barron didn't flinch, didn't glance around nervously, didn't shrink in his seat. He simply sat, calm and unwavering. The silence stretched, becoming heavier with each passing second. The journalist shifted, gripping the edge of the podium. "Tough crowd," they muttered, forcing a chuckle. It fell flat. Then Barron moved. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed back his chair and stood. The soft scrape of the chair legs against the floor was the only sound in the room. At just over 6 feet tall, his presence was commanding, not just because of his height, but because of the quiet strength he carried. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping over them before settling on the journalist. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone commanded attention. And then, he took a step forward. The journalist, frozen at the podium, watched as Barron approached. Their earlier confidence evaporated. No one knew what he would say or do. But one thing was certain. This moment now belonged to Barron Trump. When he finally spoke, his words were nothing anyone could have anticipated. "Thank you for your insight," he said, his voice steady, deliberate. The journalist blinked. The audience was caught off guard. There was no anger, no indignation, just an eerie sense of control far beyond his years. "I've grown up watching people make assumptions about me, my family, and my life," he continued, his eyes locked onto the journalist. "It's almost become a game to some, a way to fill in the gaps when you don't know the full story. And I get it. We're public figures. It comes with the territory." The room was utterly silent. Even those who had laughed earlier sat motionless, their expressions now tinged with unease. "But there's something important that often gets overlooked," Barron added, his voice carrying a subtle intensity. "Behind every headline, every punchline, there's a human being. Someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, their own story. You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really." The journalist, gripping the podium, looked visibly uncomfortable. Barron's words weren't an attack. They were a mirror, reflecting back the weight of the moment. "What I've learned," Barron said, pausing for effect, "is that respect shouldn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Barron wasn't finished. "We live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down," he continued. "Words have power. They can hurt, or they can heal. They can divide, or they can unite. And I think we could all use a little more of the latter." The audience was spellbound. His words, spoken with calm conviction, carried a weight that seemed to transcend his age. Barron took a step back, his gaze locked with the journalist's. "I hope this gives you something to think about." Then he turned and walked back to his seat. The ballroom remained frozen, stunned, and then the applause began. A single clap, then another. Then a wave of sound erupted, filling the room with a thunderous standing ovation. Within hours, the moment had gone viral. Social media exploded, news outlets covered the story. And as debates raged on, one thing was clear. Barron Trump had just given the world something to think about.